Cool. Just give it a couple of minutes for people to trickle in, and then we can start chatting.
That's awesome. I actually really like the format. I like the interface. It's very intuitive, very readable.
That's also why, like, because I feel like with Comfy, we have enough complexity, so maybe
Yeah.
the streaming platform can be simple.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You wouldn't want too many like reaction buttons and stuff like this. And
yeah, it is like a balance with AI always. Like, how do we, have the control, but also like some sort of convenience. I think about that a lot. Just like how convenient do I want my life to be.
yeah, true that.
Yeah. All right. Welcome. Thank you for joining both Luka and Maggot.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Like, people are joining, do like participate in the comments, let us know you're here. We very welcome conversation and comments and chat, because we just want to hang out, show you how things are made. And today it's a very fun thing that we're going to show, in my opinion. It's a workflow in ComfyUI that was developed by Maggot, which is basically control the sun, which I think is just incredible. Like, the power of controlling the sun, crazy. So yeah, we will look at that. So we will go a bit deeper into ComfyUI, look at how it works, what nodes do we use, how do they fit together, and then Maggot will take us through his whole process, like why did he even develop this, and we will kind of leave it to him. Oh, hello, Eric. Nice to see you. And
Hello,
Nicholas.
everyone.
Yeah, from New York City. Oh, damn.
First of all, thank you for the very wonderful introduction. Like, I wish I can take you with me everywhere. Yeah. For those who haven't maybe known about me yet, my name is Maged Al-Banna. I'm an architect currently based in Hamburg, and I've been doing some experiments in ComfyUI. And let's say that the most popular of them, or the one that gained the most traction, was the Move the Sun workflow, which was basically this little tool that would allow you to control the location of the sun in an image, and the lighting would change accordingly. And I think it's more or less it's. I would like to have to also use the format of the stream today, which I think it's something very refreshing to see on LinkedIn. To have this sort of like very casual setting, very stream-like, where people can get to join and also comment and take part in this, which is something that I absolutely encourage.
Nice.
It's also something that we're going to go step by step into this workflow. It's already the first version is already free. It's available. I'll also send a link for the first version, which is already on OpenArt, for people to also take a closer look at it, and we can discuss together the main concepts, or let's say the main ideas behind the making of this workflow. So
yeah.
Let's see if the
But first, guys, you have your coffee? Coffee.
we only allow people who have coffee here. Sorry.
Also, hello, Oksana. Nice to see you here. But yeah, I do think we'll leave all of the links in the comments, as we usually do, so you can follow Maggot and you can follow his workflows. And this is the thing, it is very open sharing. And hello, Christoph. That is kind of the way we like to do it as well, just openly share what we're doing. I think we are all individually already doing that, and it's just nice to do it together.
Okay, I'm going to need a couple of minutes to fire up the GPU before I can get started.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I can present the basic Comfy workflow.
Yeah, let's start there. Let's start with what even is Comfy, and then I think we can go into the concept of how did you even think of controlling the sun, which I think is just crazy. All right, Luka, if you want to take us away.
All right, so first, when Stable Diffusion got out, we created images in Gradio, but a bit later, Automatic 1111 got introduced, so we were making artwork in Automatic 1111. Just a bit later, I think it's about, a year and a half, when ComfyUI was presented, and a lot of people got scared, because they didn't understand the node system.
To interrupt you quickly, sorry, but Eric just wrote, please go slow, it looks scary. just on point. As you're saying, it is scary. So
Yeah. No worry, no worry. We'll go slow.
if anyone is lost or has questions, like please just speak up. Yeah, go. Sorry.
So yeah, when you open the ComfyUI, you get introduced by this screen, and those building blocks are called nodes. And this is the basic workflow for creating pictures. So you just, cue prompt, and the image appears. There you go. The thing is that we can change different models. We click here for changing models. We can use any different models. Here is where we put in the positive prompt, and here is the negative prompt. Here is the node for empty latent image, where we select the dimensions of the image. And this is the main stuff. This is the main engine. And we put the seed, we put the how many steps do we want to create in, the CFG number. This is prompt understanding. The higher the CFG, okay, I always confused. The bigger number is more prompt respectance, or is it lower number?
I think it's the lower one, right?
Yeah,
With the-
so the
with the
lower number we put in,
You zoom in
the
a bit.
more prompt will be
No.
respected. And the higher number, the more creativity we give to the Stable Diffusion model. Here is the sampler name. We can use and experiment with so many different samplers. I usually work with DPMM, 2MSDE, and this is the scheduler. And there are a couple of them. We won't go deep into those. Just use normal or carots. This is what I do. V8E decode node is turning the noise into pixels. And this is save image for saving your imagery. Thank you, Amir. Larger number is more prompt adherence. Exactly. So if we put in the CFG value 1, we will get trash. No, it's pretty good picture.
It will be pretty decent as well, actually. Yeah.
So let's put CFG 20. And yeah, this is trash. Right. Okay, those are basics. We will look into them maybe the next time. So, Maggot, are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right, take it away.
Let's go. So give me a bit of a second to find the share screen button, because now we're talking about AI, but I still can't find the share screen. Here it is. And there we go.
If you're a first-time user, or if you don't know Comfy yet, don't get scared. It's actually pretty simple. It just looks terrifying.
Okay, so now we are in a bit of a...
It still scares me to this day. So I would say it's a bit of an interesting looking format. It's like the way that ComfyUI works. If you have been into, let's say, GUIs or things like Grasshopper or Dynamo in Revit and things like this, if you work in design or architecture background, it will come off as something a bit more like familiar, because it's this node-based system where you can have different commands or different parts of your workflow where each does a specific job, and then after it's done its job, you basically take the output of this one part and then you send it to the other. So this is basically, as Luka clarified, like this idea of the small nodes or the small batteries that you can just connect together, and you end up having an entire big complex workflow. And this is basically more or less the idea of ComfyUI, is that they took the interface of Automatic 1111 and then they kind of like restructured it in this node-based format. And I think it's great. I think it allows you to be very flexible with the way that you work, and to be very to be able to kind of like create whatever idea you have in mind, because you have an overview of the entire process the whole time. So this is the workflow. that is going to be featured today, which is the Move the Sun workflow. And trust me, guys, it doesn't always look like this. I took a lot of time to organize it and make it look as readable as possible. But I think in this kind of like, first of all, in this overview, you can quickly take a look that in all of this complexity, you can see these rectangles where in each rectangle, a specific process is being done. I'm going to go step by step in this sort of in this workflow to see what each part does. So, very simple. What this workflow essentially does is that it takes an image as an input, and then it processes it through all of this motherboard-looking workflow, and then it eventually outputs something that looks like this. It can take a bit of time the first time you run a workflow, because in the first time it loads all the necessary information into the let's say the VRAM, so it can process it. However, after it's done, it should eventually give us something that looks something like any second now. Any second.
Yeah.
But yeah, any second. But yeah, it's always the case, because the first time you load a workflow, it first loads all of the necessary information inside of your VRAM or RAM, depends on what each node does, and then eventually it's going to be so much faster with every time we run it. But as you probably already know, that this workflow would just kind of like exactly like it would place, let's say, a highlight or a sun in your scene, and it would light it accordingly. So it will allow you, since it's all controllable with this one big slider. So if I were to just like grab this slider, I'm going to move it here with me, so we can kind of see it a bit more in action. If I were to move it here and then do it again, it's going to be so much faster this time. And then, whoop, you can see that the sun moves, it sets a bit, and then here, it would raise back up. So, and you kind of like, so it actually, the concept behind it, it's very simple, and it's definitely got so much more simplified after the release of IC Light. Because the good thing about IC Light is that it allows you to, let's say, define where your light source is, and then it can process the image to understand its three-dimensionality somewhat, and then it can, from understanding this kind of like scene and the depth of the scene, it can throw the light or shadows accordingly. So this is essentially what the workflow does. Let's go step by step into the workflow and kind of like go through the different concepts that I've applied here. So the first part.
I may interrupt you just for for a bit.
Of course.
So we have like some breathing time. Wow. And also like if people have any questions, I do agree. I think this workflow is so neat. Like you have really structured nicely, because like sometimes when I drop workflows into Comfy, it just like explodes, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, what is happening here? You know. And I think like a big kind of why the fear comes is because it is so unknown. Like because you can build anything, but like you don't know what you have to build and how it looks like.
True.
My question here is,
absolutely,
where did your concept come from? Even, or why did you want to move the sun? Why was that important for you?
Well, because it's something that happens quite often as architects. Is after you end up rendering a scene, and then you find out that for some reason the lighting is not exactly how you would want it to be, or maybe the positioning of the sun or the positioning of your light source is not necessarily where you eventually wanted it to be. And the whole idea is that I wanted to maybe take this concept and add it onto a previously existing concept, which is using control net modules like with like canny edges, or let's say with segmentation, so you can build up your rendering, and then you can take your rendering and then relight it. So it's kind of like an approach to build a comprehensive rendering engine, more or less. So you can render the image using, like you can have a sketch, and then you can render something realistic out of it. You can take this realistic product, and then you would apply IC lighting to kind of change the lighting in the scene. So you have something that's a bit more comprehensive. I see that there's also there's a comment, something wrong with voice echo. So is there an echo in my voice? Can you confirm if you...
Yeah, it's better now. Maybe the echo is for me.
Okay. But like once again, if the echo is still there, we can also like try to see if I can maybe hook up an extra microphone so it would isolate whatever noise that I have. Also, someone said, yeah, the shadow and the trees are like the shadow of the trees are opposite. That is absolutely true. This is actually a phenomena that happens quite often, not just in icy light, but generally in like in the entire generative AI. Nothing goes necessarily exactly how you want it, especially not from the first try. What we try to do as much as possible is to make a workflow that can give you consistent results with as, let's say, little seed play as possible or with as little randomness as possible, because this would allow you to say, okay, just like from the very first get-go, you have a very decent result, and then you can kind of like play a little bit with the randomization until you get something that you really like. Because also the models sometimes they don't really understand how exactly the shadows should be thrown. However, I think that it does also a very good. Let me also reshare my screen once again. I think it also does a very decent. Can you guys see my screen again?
If you can share it.
It's not shared yet. Okay, here.
And oh yeah, yeah. Can you do it again? Sorry.
Yeah, I think something. Yeah, just again, once again here.
And what you said right now, this is so well put, of like limiting the randomization and the seed. I think that
Exactly.
is a big thing about AI. I think most of our work with these workflows is figuring out how we can go from like our idea to the output that we want as quickly as possible with as little like re-rolls and iterations as possible.
True, true. I completely agree, and I think this is why sometimes, like, or pretty much always when I work, I try to like completely lock the randomization, and I just work on one seed number to get this one seed number that I don't like into a direction where I say, oh, okay, this is actually very close to what I like. So I wouldn't blame it on the randomization. I would try as much as possible to blame it on the bad input, for example, or maybe the control net module could have been better or something like this. So I would just freeze the randomization and I try to enhance it as well as possible. So I reduce the, let's say, the craziness that comes out of the randomness.
Oh
However,
wow,
yeah,
that is brilliant. That is
I
absolutely brilliant.
yeah, thank you. It's just like once again, this is like philosophy based off of my own experiences. Everybody has a different way of work, which I'm also like very interested to hear about. Like in the comments, if anybody has a comment on any of what I say, if you think there is a better way to do it and stuff, I would be more than happy to listen.
Yes,
But
there
here
was
you can see
a
in
question.
this. Oh, sorry.
There was a question from Manuel. He said,
Oh,
"If I have
oh,
understand now,
sorry.
can the sun and the lighting be edited over a render did from other software?"
So can the sun and yeah, well, good question. I think yes, as long as you, let's say, map every input that you have with something that you already have originally in your software, that would work great. So, for example, one of the workflows that we have been developing over time was working with segmentation. And as you, I don't know, like how many of the people also in the audience know, segmentation is this control net module or model that would take an image, parse it into individual items based off of computer vision. It can actually recognize what each part of the image is. And it will tell you, okay, now I've segmented this image, and it can show you colors. It would highlight the chair, and then it would color it with red. It would highlight, I don't know, a wall and color it green, and so forth. And then you can use the segmentation image, like this kind of like blobs of color that you have from this, and then you can hook it up, and you can generate something even more precise just because you have very good definition from this thing. So this is one of the things that you can do with ControlNet. However, if people here who have, let's say, a bit of a background in 3D modeling, there are some passes in 3D render engines that does something very similar. Perfect. Thank you so much, Luca, for the example. So there are these kinds of passes that you can immediately get out of your 3D modeling or 3D rendering engine that looks exactly like the segmentation output, and you can just hook it up directly into your model. So what you can do is that instead of using this control net, you can just actually take the output from your software, whichever that you like to use, you connect it directly with your control net model, and then you can work on it directly. I know that there is a lot of technicality in what I'm saying, but all I'm saying is, yes, for example, if in your software you can have a specific icon or a circle in your viewport that indicates where the sun is, you can definitely use it as the input for this move the sun module, and it would actually follow where the sun is. However, I don't know if it will be lighting as accurately as what you have, but I think it will go a long way in making the results much more consistent, because what you have in the viewport, you would already see lighting, you would already see shadows being thrown, so it would guide the model into a more, let's say, believable direction. So I would definitely agree with Manuel. I think if you have this sort of like viewport where you have a sun and you have shadows, it will go a long way in helping IC Light understand more of let's say the lighting, and it will maybe build on it much better than if you just like leave it to guess. So I would say, short answer, yes.
Oh, brilliant, man. This was a great explanation. Amir
Yeah.
also pointed out that the segmentation anything model, it's the meta SAM, which you can also like access like independently, but it is a node inside Comfy as well, right?
Yes, exactly. And in ComfyUI, you can also do the same. So you can also in ComfyUI just like right click on whatever base image, and then you can highlight an area where you have like where you want the sun to be, and then you can just directly connect it, and that would be your sun. Maybe we can even try to adjust this workflow to work with something similar. But the whole idea of this workflow, it was more or less about the convenience of having one. If I can also share the screen once more.
Yeah, this is just a segment node. Thank you for sharing, Luka, for looking all these things.
Absolutely, really amazing like slideshow work, to be honest.
Yeah. And as Manuel said, like incredible time saving of just like doing these things. And I think that's like the absolute magic of Comfy, that you can really go from yourself. Like there is something that you know and you want to do, you can just build it. But of course, you do require the knowledge of the nodes.
I completely agree. It can always save you in like a pinch. Like you have a, I don't know, like you have a sketch and you want to just like quickly generate something that you want to share with your team. You want to, I don't know, give to the visualization team to have a better understanding. And instead of just like keeping it on this very conceptual level of sketching, you can also have something that's a bit more concrete. You can play with the lighting a bit. So the potential is definitely there. So yeah, back to the workflow.
Shall we go into the workflow then? Let's go zoom in.
Yeah.
What is happening?
Yeah, I'll try to zoom in as much as possible. And once again, once you download the workflow, there are always these little notes that will guide you to also like through the process to help you understand how exactly the entire thing was built. Or it can confuse you. I don't know. You can also leave a comment to say I was confused. So I can also like refine the notes a bit better. So for the first node, something that I usually make in all of my workflows is resolution preparation, which I take my image. You have images that you can download from all different types and sources. You can download it from, I don't know, from Behance, and each image has a specific resolution and quality. So the first thing that I do is to try to unify the resolution of an image. So I would take the image, and the first thing that I would do is to resize it. And I found that a good way to resize an image is after you, like, there is this node that you can also like kind of take a note of. It's called image resizing by the shorter side. So it will allow you to resize the image while maintaining that the shorter side of the image doesn't go too small and you eventually end up with something super pixelated. So this is the first thing that I like to do, and I like to keep like the shorter side to be always 512, which is this magical number that like Stable Diffusion really loves, because it's like basically the average or like around the size of the images that the models were trained on. And then I would get this resolution, and you can already see how important this output is, because it's pretty much used throughout the entire workflow. Because the width and the height is going to be determinant in the position of the sun. And we were going to explain this later. So the other part is, we're going to get back to the big slider later. And so this is basically the second step here. And it looks gigantic, but it's actually super simple. The above part is the prompt, like the blue part is the prompt. And the green part, this light green part, is just simply the masking part. So for the question that we had before, because someone asked, can I replace this with just like right-clicking, or just like I would have my mask in a specific area and this is where I want the sun is? Absolutely, and it can, like technically speaking, replace this entire green part. However, I will explain why these things look complex, but actually they really aren't. So,
Also, just for like the whole like building workflows in Comfy, I think the way you explain it of like blocks and like areas, I think that's a very useful way to think about it. Like first you say this is the resizing part, this is the prompt part, this is the mask part.
yes.
I think it makes it much less overwhelming if you think in these like bigger blocks.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because it's always a difficult part to kind of like install a node or load a node, and then like you just or or a workflow, and then you just see like a spaghetti bowl, and you really don't know where you should go, where should you begin, and how does it end, and it can become very like also very nauseating over time. So I think it's very important to kind of like highlight the main concepts, and let's say the part where each output of each, let's say, phase has been processed and done, so you can have a better understanding of your own workflow, so you can also develop and build on it. So definitely, I think the organization can go a long way in improving the process overall. So for the first part, which is the prompting, the idea was very simple. I call it dynamic prompting. Maybe the term has already been coined, but I like to think that I'm the first one to ever think of the term dynamic prompting. So the idea of dynamic prompting is you having a prompt that changes according to a parameter, something else that you control, which in this case is our slider. So let's actually use something that I really like to use quite often, which is one of my favorite softwares,
Brilliant.
Paint.
Brilliant.
So you have, let's say, whatever prompt that you want. You have something you want to talk about architecture. Oh wow, maybe we can increase the size because this is just unreadable. Perfect. So you have like, oh no, this is too much. Bear with me, guys.
It all
It will
starts with paint.
it will eventually,
Always.
yeah, perfect.
This is how the images start.
This is quality work right there. So you can say something like architecture. You can say something like sunny. You can say something like you're writing your prompt. You're happy with writing like all the keywords that you want to include in your like final generation. You can say something like I don't know, green landscape, or green and then landscape, and so forth. And the idea of this sort of dynamic prompting is that I want to pick a few words or certain segments, and I want them to change in importance, whether it goes up in importance or down, according to a specific parameter that I'm going to define later. And this is the big slider. So this is the main idea, is that instead of having something fixed, so you have a prompt that just never changes, it actually, let's say, flows with how you want things to go. So it would, and in this case, in the case of this particular workflow, it was actually two words, which is blue, clear sky, and sunset. So this is what this whole thing is actually about. That what all of this does is that it constructs my prompt. So it would have like a fixed part, or let's say a constant part, and then it would have a variable part. The variable part, which is this and this, these are the two guys that keep moving up and down in importance. So I made it so that this word would actually go up in importance the more you take the slider to the left. And also, in contrast, the word sunset would go down. So when your image generates, it would see, okay, so sunset is not that important when the slider is to the left, but a blue clear sky, oh, that's very important. So this is why the sun would shine very brightly. And the opposite would happen. It would just like reverse. If you go here, it would just reverse, where the blue clear sky, it would just reduce in importance, and the other way around for sunset. So this is what this whole thing is doing.
Okay.
I don't know for you guys, but I think this approach is so brilliant and so smart, and it's just excellent. I mean,
Thank
Yeah.
you so
so
much.
good.
I was just about to
I'm
say,
getting shivers all over my body, man.
Come on, like you're very generous, really. You're very generous, and I bet like a lot of people have already explored similar things and similar concepts, because I think if the idea of dynamic prompting, generally speaking, like I bet people already, let's say, thought of something like this, and they apply it in also very creative ways. I think also one of the very interesting ways you can apply something similar to dynamic prompting is to, let's say, have a list of architectural styles, and then you can mask an area where you have a specific building, and then you can go through a list of architectural styles, and each time it would generate something of something. So stuff like this is what's generally, I would say, falls under dynamic. So your prompt can change according to what you want, or your workflow process.
This
So
is actually a base for automatization.
exactly. And I think a lot of the workflows that I like to work on, I always like to include the purpose of human use, to make it user friendly, for things to not be complex, for one thing or two things maximum to be able to control the entire thing. The fine tuning can take part a bit later, or for people who are interested in tweaking, but the most important thing is that it works on just one big, or I don't know, like maximum 2 or 3 inputs. So this way, like your entire workflow would dance around it. So
Okay.
this is the first part.
a quick breather after the first
Absolutely,
part.
I can also kind of like come back here to
Yeah,
come back.
just to check in. First of all, I agree with Luka. For me, this is also conceptually, it's so smart, like with the dynamic prompt, and like how you had to think of this. You had to figure out, how can I affect the actual sun using what I have inside here. It's really brilliant. It's so good, man.
Thank you so much. And yeah, once again, like I think it's not necessarily. I think the idea has also been explored quite often, and even like I see in the comments, Amir is saying
Yes.
dynamic prompter was an extension for automatic 1111, and that's true. I think there was also a part of automatic 1111 where you can tell it, let's say, a specific prompt, and it would kind of flow from one prompt into another, and kind of give you all the different results that come in between. And yeah, for manual, yeah, looks like grasshopper logic. Absolutely, this is the whole idea about GUIs, or let's say the node-based interfaces. If you have a background in Grasshopper, even Cinema 4D, Unreal Engine, all of these, they employ this thing more or less. 3ds Max, V-Ray, all of these, they have a very similar, let's say, philosophy and workflow. If you know this, you wouldn't have a hard time going into ComfyUI. You just have to understand, let's say, like as naturally as you used to do it before. And yes, I've been using dynamic. Yeah, so it has been introduced. Yeah, October 22, when Stable Diffusion was released. Because I'm actually not super active on automatic 1111, so a lot of these things I don't really know about, because I'm not very active on automatic 1111. But I think, yeah,
Actually, automatic 1111 was introduced. The Stable Diffusion was introduced in August 2022.
Yeah, and for me, I have been using the dynamic prompts. I love the concept of dynamic prompts exactly
yeah.
because you can quickly go. And yeah, in automatic 1111, it was like in the scripts when you can just say, replace the word blue with the word yellow, red, whatever.
Yeah,
You know,
perfect.
and
I
it's
mean,
it's the same concept of just like, but you use it with weights. You use it with like the weight
yes,
importance, which is also an interesting way to do it. You know,
yeah.
it's so good.
And
It's
and like the way that I've done it in this workflow, it's very brute force, so to say. So we can also take a quick look at how it was done. like once again, I don't want to go too much into the nitty-gritty of how it was done and like how this was connected. You can always take a look at the workflow later. But so here you can see
just a moment. There was another question. Eric asked, can this work on a Mac or only PC? So I have
did I miss something?
I have
Okay.
ComfyUI on the Mac,
So
but it comes down to the GPU more or less, right?
So for Macs, it's a bit difficult because Macs, the thing about Apple is that their hardware excels when it comes to processors because they have very strong processors that can work with minimal heat emission and very good speed and battery life. However, this is also the negative part is that unfortunately they don't really excel when it comes to GPUs. They don't have a lot of they're not really into GPUs and things like that. So you wouldn't be able to do it locally. I don't think so. I don't think you would be able to do it locally.
And pitch in here, I have tried it because I do have a Mac, and actually I have like a laptop Mac.
You
and
wizard! How did you do it?
I'm just gonna say, if you want to use a Mac, get ready to drink coffee and walk around while the machine is running and burning, more or less, because it will take time to render things. So I would definitely suggest like having a PC with NVIDIA or just running it in cloud.
Exactly. So this was my second suggestion, is to just run it in cloud. In fact, I'm already using a cloud-based service, which is called RunPod.
Yeah,
Not sponsored. I'm not sponsored, but it just seemed to be it just seemed to be the best platform for this sort of situation out there, and it's also like relatively cheap. I think it's one of the better alternatives out there. It just like requires a bit of tweaking to get your let's say virtual notebook up and running. But other than that, you can always take a look. But yeah, cloud computing is also one way of doing it if you have a Macintosh. But unfortunately, no. Windows PCs, they're the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
So
moving on,
I think we can get back to the.
And thank you to Amir for like pointing out and like participating about like how Stable Diffusion was released, like all the plugins. Anyone who has anything to add or to comment, please do. Like we're very happy to share anything.
And also let me know once there are questions, because once I share my screen, I can't really see the interface. So
we got you.
You have to kind of like nudge me if something happens.
Just show us the magic and we will nudge you.
And we're back. So so here in this part, and the two parts are like equally similar. They do the exact same thing. One time I made a prompt for one part for the sky and the other part for the sun. This will make sense a bit later on. But the way that I would construct a prompt is very simple. It's by using string concatenation. So this is basically typing words and sticking them next to each other. So it was literally a brute force solution by just kind of constructing the how the prompt would be written, because the way that a prompt, you can apply weight on a specific word in ComfyUI or Stable Diffusion, is that you put it between brackets and then you can assign the weight into the prompt itself. So for example, if you want to say, I don't know, car red, but this is, let's say, a very small prompt, and you want this car to be very red, so you put it between two brackets and then you write like 1.2, for example. So if you write it in this format, the car is going to eventually end up way too red. But this is how it works. And if you reduce this value, it's going to go down. So now the idea is to basically construct exactly how this was written. So I'm going to write something like car, and then like this, and this is going to be the first part. This is the first string. And then I'm going to concatenate with, let's say, the value. I'm going to have a number.
Just to explain quickly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to explain quickly, Every token or every word has a weight of 1. So every one of them is 1. If you want to
Exactly.
emphasize
Yeah.
something, you add on 1.1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And if you want to have less of something, you go to negative. That's 0 0.9, 0.0, 0.8, 0.7. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I also have a question here. Like what you're showing now, how would you describe this thought process of stringing things together in this methodical way?
It's basically by having simple string nodes being concatenated by other strings that I will attach to the slider. So it's going to be, it's like, this is the part where I don't want to get super technical about, because it will become clear once you take a look at or zoom in into the workflow itself. But this is basically how it was constructed, just brute forcing. I would just write let's say, the string, or maybe let's write it here down, complete, next to each other. So I want to have my car red. But once again, I want to make my car, let's say, a little bit more red. So I'm going to make a column and then write the value 1.2, because the default is always 1. So if you want to increase it by 20%, you would say 1.2. And then you put it between two brackets. And the way that this whole process was done was just by segmenting this, by just putting it into blocks of text. So this is the first block of text. I will write it into a string. This is like its own string, and it's going to be concatenated with another number, which is this value. And then it's going to end up with a bracket, which is this part. So this is literally the whole process. It's just text, and then the column, and then the value, and then this. But the way that you see the string is constructed, it's very interesting, because now you have string that you can write, another string that you can write, and then you have a value. And this is where we can play, because now you have a number. And this number you can connect to the big slider. So this is how it was constructed. And eventually, you would just end up with this, the value, and then the rest of the prompt, you can also continue writing whatever you want. You also want to have like a tree in the background and whatever, and so forth. You can continue writing your thing, but your number is connected to the big slider. And since it's a value and it can kind of like log itself into the string and become like one big complete string where you have the value changed, this is where you can have this kind of like dynamic action happening. And this is basically what's happening here.
Nice.
I'm basically writing bright, clear blue sky, high quality. This is my base prompt. And then I would concatenate, I think it's pronounced, concatenated with another segment, which is orange and red tint sunscreen. And then the column. And then I want, after this, I want to add my value. So I'm going to here put the value. This is basically the string. This is directly connected with this. And then I can just hook it up to here. And now you can see how the entire thing is flowing. You can just kind of like ignore this space in between, and then you can look at it as one big continuous prompt, which is, this is the fixed part, the part that I don't want to change, but this is the part that I want to change. This is the sunset that I want the value to, let's say, decrease when I go to the left and increase when I go to the right, and so forth.
Megan, can you see the whole? Oh, okay. That's it. That's what I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Can
I
you
already
see
read
the
your
whole
mind.
prompt? Yes.
So eventually it will look something like this. It will be one big complete prompt with the weighting fully intact in one nice prompt. And we can also see, if I, once again, grab this BS, and then if I change this, look what happened. Like the weight would change. And this is basically what makes this sunrise, sunset effect. It's actually just embedded in the prompt.
This is so brilliant, man. This is so brilliant. You thought out.
Yeah, I mean, this is why, like, in this kind of like prompting, in the sense of having a parameter where this parameter or like this slider can actually change the let's say the prompt itself, it has probably been applied, of course, numerous times. But once again, since a lot of the efforts that are being done are individual, um, I haven't really seen it, let's say, being prominently done somewhere. But once again, I actually am very interested to also see different examples of this dynamic prompting. If someone out there did something similar, please reach out, and I would very much like to see how you integrated something like this, because it's as close as we get to having a very usable interface when you have something that works this way.
Megan,
And
I'm sorry, you're also experimenting with spline editor, right?
Mhm.
So spline editor is kind of a field,
Yeah,
graphic field, where you can actually draw a line, where you can draw the path, how things are going through time,
yeah.
right?
With that, that's absolutely true. You can also use the spline editor, but the thing with the spline editor that I use, because like the thing about ComfyUI is, since it's open source, so a lot of the nodes that you have are contributions from other programmers, and you have to think with the programmer of each node, basically, because it's not fully fleshed out and refined with like a huge budget where they do things that are like super user friendly and like it has every piece of data that you want. So for the node that I had to use for let's say the second version, it didn't have, unfortunately, like it didn't have a clear way of extracting the X data and the Y data as well. And this is basically what I want. Like I want the Cartesian information to so I can locate where the sun is going to be in the image, because the image is just a Cartesian space, and you can just kind of like boil it down into X and Y. And based off of this information, because if you have a curve, you can always have a point that you can put the sun on. But for some reason, it would have the information for the Y, but it wouldn't have it for the X. So for the second version, I would actually, let's say, rebuild the X information, but just extract the Y information. So they would work seamlessly together. But this is something that, once again, it's a bit into the nitty gritty. And we can also maybe discuss it later when, if we have time. But once again, I always like to kind of like play around exactly with this part. I don't think that this kind of like explanation or going into these kind of workflows is giving the same, let's say, traditional insight that you would see from mainstream content creators, because they usually would talk about how let's say specific nodes would work in unison together so they can produce a product that is more or less also not exactly what we want as designers or architects. It's usually, let's say, portraits or fantasy images and stuff, and they usually use the nodes for exactly what they have to be used for, you know. But I really like the idea of kind of like breaking the norm and kind of like rethinking it in creative ways to see what can come out of it. You can also kind of like having this idea of the slider or so forth. A lot of people are also very creative in something like this, and I've seen a lot of examples, wonderful examples on OpenAI as well. So yeah, it's more or less just an exploration of like another modus of thinking, let's say. So
often comes down to like individual needs. Like if you really think about like, why do I need this, or like what can this technology do for me? I think again, like with Comfy, it's just a canvas. Like literally, there is no rule except for
yeah,
what you build, more or less.
yeah,
And, and,
Why?
if, and if you know some Python, you can make your own nodes.
yeah,
Or if you
absolutely.
have access to GPT, you can
Yeah,
just estimate nodes.
Exactly, insane.
no, that's cheating. Hey, no. No, absolutely. You're free to use whatever tool you want to achieve whatever you want. But once again, like my philosophy or my idea about it, as long as you use AI as a tool to achieve what you want, do whatever you want, like do it. But please, as much as possible, don't let it be the 100% designer. Don't let it take completely over.
Yes.
Always
Oh
have
my
like a
God.
spark. Always have just something as well. Like
And this is
be
what separates good and bad, you know.
it
If
separates two ideas, not necessarily being good and bad. It's just an idea that, so we wouldn't entirely lose creativity. So also like we wouldn't just kind of like dry up completely as humans, which is also, yeah, it's one facet of bad. But but yeah, it's
I think about these things all the time, like about
yeah,
how this affects us as creators and creatives, but absolutely, like there needs to be intention. Like without intention, you're just pressing buttons, and everyone can do that. Everyone can press a button at the end of the day, you know. But
Yeah, true.
if you think actually and have intention on like what are you going to be doing with this, I think that's where the importance comes from. Especially like because this is happening. This has been happening. AI is like it's here for everyone at this moment, like in our lives, in our works. So I think it is important to kind of think about how are you going to live here. You know, are you just going to be pressing buttons, or do you actually want to participate actively and make something? You know, that you actually want to
Yeah,
make something
yeah,
that will connect with other humans. Oh wow,
true.
brilliant conversation, man. I'm glad we came here.
Yeah, but I completely agree with you. It's also like it raises up a lot of, let's say, ideas about, also like ComfyUI. You don't have to understand it just for this. Like it's not about just the technicality. It's also about having good insights. It's helpful for everyone, whether you are, let's say, a student and beginning in something, or you're a CEO at a company. You have to also have just a bit of understanding on how this whole thing works. It gives you just, it just gives you a better understanding of things, even if you disagree on it. Just knowing about it is enough to make you somewhat better. It's enough to make you somewhat better professionally and also in a philosophical level. But let's not get, we can
You
keep
have
the,
to think differently. You have to start differently. I mean, it's the new
yeah,
world we live in right now. We're starting a new world, and we
yeah,
have to adapt our minds to new tools and new understanding to new philosophies.
yeah.
100%, yeah.
That's, it's a new age. True, it is
Yeah.
very much a new age. And the thing is that sometimes these things just sneak by and then they just become a big deal later on. And yeah, it's yeah, I think this is why it's important to just know about it at the very least. It's interesting to
That's
just
the
like,
biggest thing I think, like when it comes to like autonomy, like or any change, like if you're not aware of what is going on, like what you can't really do anything, like it's just gonna happen, you know. I think it's
yeah,
similar
yeah,
of what you say, like this is transforming us, our work, like how we live, how we create. And what you say of like knowing, just knowing how ComfyUI works, what it can do, or like what the technology can do, it gives you the autonomy and access to actually influence how you want to transform and adapt to it. Like if you don't understand these things, they're gonna happen, and you know that's also a thing.
true.
Um,
So
Good
it's
point from Simon. It's the first
Terrific
time ever we're actually having access to work with our data. This is so cool. Yeah.
true. In one sense, I think in one big sense, yes. I think the change right now is much more quantitative. Now you're thinking about data in everything you do. And it's different than before. Because before, like true, we also used to work with data, but it was very localized and it's based off of something like small and defined. You kind of like play around with it. Like I would, speaking like from my, let's say, background in Grasshopper and Dynamo and stuff like this, you always work with data. Like a building can also be broken down in data, and you can also work around with this data, so you can end up having some, and like a specific, I don't know, you automate a specific task or stuff like this. But now the scale is just different, and machine learning, the way it works, it's sometimes also dangerous to think about, because it only works well if you feed it as much information as possible from probably humans who, let's also go a bit level deeper, probably they don't really agree on having their information taken. So an example of which is also super interesting. Did you know that these CAPTCHA tests to prove that you're human or whatever? Yeah, it is to prove that you're human. But the whole time we have been training a machine learning device somewhere, or like a machine learning model, for it to understand better what's inside the pictures. So we have
Recognition
been,
system. Yeah.
this is, we have been actually teaching it this whole time, so without us necessarily knowing, or and like, this is where like the acceptance or agreement is a bit kind of a gray area. It's like, what's up, you know?
yeah, great conversation. I think we should like do an episode just on this. Like absolutely, like this. These are very important topics and questions. Maybe
Absolutely.
let's wrap up the workflow for today. But yeah,
Oh,
like AI
sure.
raises so many new questions and areas that we need, as society and humans, really talk about. But yeah,
Absolutely.
there are a few
I,
other comments. Amir said, "This is great. I wonder if you could use the animate diff node and extract the XY spline interpolation from there."
so the ah it's that's actually a very good question. This is something that I don't really understand fully, like how to use animate def. to, let's say, make coherent movement, and then you can kind of like splice up individual frames, so you end up with something more consistent. To be honest, like I would actually reverse it. I would rather say, if you know something about it, I would be more than happy to know if you can apply animated diff in something like this. That would be great. I'm trying to use some animated diff nodes. Haven't been really I don't know, didn't really make that big of a difference at all. Like once I used some animate diff, but maybe I've been using it wrong.
Yeah, if anyone has anything to share, always very happy. Just reach out to any of us.
Yeah, of course. And I know that we couldn't really manage maybe to cover the entirety of the workflow. Maybe we've been sidetracked a bit by.
I think we still have time to like do it. I would love to wrap up the whole thing for sure.
Absolutely. Maybe I can go over, let's say, the main parts of it and how it worked. Maybe I can also share my screen, because I think we have 5 minutes.
We can go. I mean, if you have time, I'm okay. If you both have time, I'm okay.
I mean, I put, let's say, a tolerance of 30 minutes. So
yeah,
I'm good if also like the audience are interested in also like joining, and we can definitely extend the time a bit.
I think so. I will save the comments and we can like answer those later as well.
So this was for the first part, which is the writing the prompt. So yeah, back to this kind of like overview. So the top part, the blue part, prompt, like now you kind of like, we wrapped up the idea of having this, let's say, prompt where you have some values. So you have some words that would gain more importance and some words that would, let's say, have less importance with the way that this slider would work. So the second part was the masking. And like we've kind of like described before, back to the drawing board. So the idea of the masking, yeah, like this is like state-of-the-art technology right there. So you have an image, and this image is basically your canvas. This is your Cartesian system, so to say. It's your playground, and it has two axes. It has the x-axis and the y-axis. This is what we're most familiar with. And I want to draw a circle somewhere along a specific path. So this is basically what this thing is all about. So you can just define the points along the way on a specific way. The most easier form of which is to just have like one. I want this circle to, let's say, go from left all the way to the right. So in this case, I would want to freeze the value of y and keep increasing the value of x. But this sounds interesting. It's also very similar to the idea of the dynamic prompt. This is a value that I want to keep increasing in accordance to something that I can control. So we can connect this to the BS. BS sounds a bit bad. Maybe I should change the. Maybe I should change this. But this is what makes it catchy, so we're just going to leave it this way. So this value is basically what I'm going to be connecting with the big slider. So this means that now I would have a mask, this kind of like circle, that would move from the left to the right, according to how much I would change this x value. But at the same time, sun doesn't necessarily move horizontally in this manner. So in this case, I've made something else that works alongside the main slider that will also move the y value incrementally lower in the image, so that over time, like the more this value, let's say, gets added, or let's say the more that you control the x value, or you push the slider to the right and left, this value is going to be taken and added in part to the y value. So over time, this is actually, if you look at it, this is the very simple curve of a line, where you can say, like, if x equals y, you're going to end up with something that looks like basically like this, because you're going to, oh, it's getting a bit messy. Maybe we can just like clean up again. So you're going to be ending up with something like, if this is the x and this is the y, and basically this, as we said, we get the value of the x from the big slider, and the y is going to change accordingly. So basically it's a linear value. So x equals an amount plus y, and this y can also have a factor. But once again, it's just in like said in a nutshell, it is a linear curve. So it will look more or less something like this. So you would have your value change or increase the more that you move your slider, and the y value would also increase with the same slider according to a specific formula that I have defined here. So this whole part, without getting too much into the details, is just, once again, with very simple nodes, which is like subtracting, multiplication, is just defining this format. I can't really remember the formula that I've used exactly, but it's basically, it was a linear format. So the way that it works in this scene is that if you have your picture, it would move from the left to the right in a linear fashion. I know it's not very optimal. Planet Earth would probably disagree, but at the same time, this is how I just like did it for the sake of simplicity. Just like kind of have it in this linear form where you can keep pushing it down. And also, like in the very first few steps, I've kind of like defined some factors for margins, also based off of some like pure math formulas that would basically limit the movement of the sun into a specific area. So I defined like a horizon line, and I defined like a left margin and a right margin. And the upper margin, I think you can go as far as you want. But it's basically to kind of trap the sun inside of this area. So no matter how crazy you go with the sun, it wouldn't set beyond a specific horizon line that you can also change the value of. If you look here, there's also a specific like bottom margin. And I think I also put something for the top margin, which is like 10% of the image. So like you have 10% from up here, and then 50% from down here, which is like at the half of the image. This is going to be the horizon line. So I just wanted to kind of like go into the main concepts very quickly, but not necessarily too much into like the brass tacks and the nitty-gritty, how it was done, how everything was drawn. But just this one node, maybe it's worth mentioning, because this is the node that I used to draw my shape. This is the, I think if I can duplicate this node so I can see it in its original shape. Convert, no, I don't want to convert it. I want to, let's say something like copy and then fix it. Yeah, so this is what it looks like in its original form. It is something that you can use, and it's, yeah, but I also renamed it, but it's something like draw shape or mask by shape, I think. Mask by shape, or let's say shape. Yeah, create shape mask. So this is actually the original node, and you can define a shape. I defined the circle, and you have the frame width and height. This is basically the full width of the frame. This is the width and the height. These are these two, frame width and frame height. And then location X and location Y, this is the center point of where your sun is supposed to be on this frame according to the frame width and height that you've given. So you can already see that the frame width and height, you can already connect with our width and height that we've already prepared, because we already have it here at the ready. And here the location of X and Y is always going to be the multiplication of this frame width and height to the factor that we have been defining with all this math, basically. So this has just have been pure math work. And it's always been kind of like a play on this create shape thing. So you have a center point, you have the frame, you can just go ahead and play however you want. Of course, all of this have actually been simplified in the second version because it works with just one nice spline. You can just draw the spline and that's it. You don't have to kind of like play with any algebra or something. So,
by the way, you can turn any value of a node into input or output.
Yes, exactly. This is also worth mentioning. Thank you, Luka, so much for these comments. They're actually like super helpful. Create, that's actually true. So create shape mask. Yeah. So that's true. These are like, they show it here as widgets. This is how they call it. A widget is like when you have it as a parameter that you can just change here, for example. But you can right click and you can convert it into an input. So I don't want to actually write it down myself. Just I want you to get the feedback from this node, which is already given me the exact width and height of this frame. And maybe we can even kind of like quickly simulate how it works. I think this would also be super helpful if we say something like mask to image, convert mask to image here, and then preview, so we can see how it looks like. Let's see. Yeah, so now if we change the location X, let's say something like 500, it moves in the X direction. If we change the Y, I don't know, like let's say something like 300, it would move down. Yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive, but usually in pixel space, the X-axis is flipped. So remember everything that I said, just flip it upside down, and it will make sense. So it's which actually kind of makes it easier for me, because in this workflow, I wanted to go from left and up to down and right. So all I had to do is just increase the value and it would go down with me. So this is basically what happened. The more that you increase the value, the more it would just go down. So yeah, it's just kind of math play using the location of the X and location of the Y. You already have everything set up, and now it can just move. And now if we take a look at the output of this, we can actually just use the same. I'm going to zoom back here, grab these two, because they're already making a very good team together. I can just put them here and grab this here. And you can see, like, also the circle, like the circle here looks a bit blurry because I've already applied a blur effect on it with this blur node. And I'm gonna grab this boy and then just here. As you can see, it just changes accordingly. And as I said, like, it's also moving with this very linear movement. So it's very smooth. So, or like as smooth as a line can get.
That is, again, incredible, man. so well thought out. And
sorry, I'm back. I'm now back from ComfyUI world.
I mean, and I keep thinking how elegant it is. It is well thought out, and that's what makes it so elegant, because you knew exactly like how to make it smooth, how to make it work for you, man. There is something that Luka put up that
more or less. Well, I am honored to have been like compared with the great Charles Day.
Oh my god.
That's Charlie Day from It's Always
Sunny
Sunny
in Philadelphia. Yeah.
Love him.
Man, it's so well thought out. It's so ridiculous.
It's once again, Nate, as you've said, it's like you look at the necessity and it kind of just like guides you there. Like you want it to work, and then once you see the input and you already have a specific thing in mind, so you already start to think, well, maybe I can kind of like do it in a specific way. It can also be regular. You always think back to this idea of having this one slider, how you can always attach it to the input of another node, and you can kind of like play with it.
And that is the thing.
You can do anything with this logic. You can apply it to really anything, to the height of the object in renders, to like, I mean, it's wonderful.
It reminds me of like working with After Effects as well, where you could like literally have the values inside and change them, or you could create a slider connected to the values, and then you like move the slider accordingly. And what I like about it is that you connected everything to one slider. There's literally just like the big slider, man.
Yeah.
It's a very complex name for. I think it's perhaps even like once again, like if anybody like has an idea, maybe perhaps how to simplify formulas or mathematical formulas, because I think, for example, this is also something that you also touched on very briefly, Nate, is you can program yourself. You can program and do Python scripts, and you can include it because it's nice. It's open source. It supports pretty much everything. I think a lot of integrations from different programs can be integrated into ComfyUI. So you can do it yourself. You can actually have a node into this environment that can just read a formula. So you can just like kind of fx, and then you just equal, and then you can write whatever you want. And all of this would just be shrunk down into just one nice formula. I haven't found it while I was doing the workflow, I haven't found something like this. But of course, like that would be great if someone can do something like this.
Amir did say earlier that like he has thoughts on like anime diffusion, what we're talking about. So I'm sure like that's another fun conversation to be had. There was a question earlier that I thought was interesting, and I think we might answer it. For your workflow, what is left? What is left at this point?
What is left for the workflow to continue working on? Well,
to share, to walk us through.
You mean for the second version, for version 2?
No. So with this workflow, is this the final point? Like the mask, is this where it ends, or like what is next?
This is basically the main two concepts, like let's say this dynamic prompt, and then the light source, which is this blob that we've been talking about. And this we just input into IC, and the result is just like you just kind of shoot and hope. So
yeah, but the thing is, it's based on the model called IC Light, right?
Yes.
Which was created by Ilya Lyasevil?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think he posted it. I think maybe about a month ago, or
I don't think not even, man. But people created so many cool workflows with it. It's just incredible.
That's open source. It's just it's always like this.
I'm here to send a link for the math expression, so you can find that.
Math expression. I think this one I've downloaded, but for some reason math expression, I think maybe it's maybe this one, but I can't remember. But I think I've downloaded this one, and for some reason it didn't really it didn't really have exactly what I wanted. But maybe they updated or maybe it's actually something else. I'll definitely take a look at it. Thanks once again, Amir. I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing everything. We do appreciate it. Okay, the question, and like if anyone else has questions, please do. But otherwise, like I think soon we should also wrap it up. But like there was a question earlier that Adnan asked: is it possible to generate an image that includes depth information, ambient occlusion, and hard edge detection?
Well, see, here is the interesting part. The model, I don't think it's refined enough, or let's say in the way that you give the input, it doesn't have, or it doesn't enable you to input these individual settings in as input in the node itself. So IC Light so far, it just works with just as you've seen, like just a blob, just a place where you can you define this is where the light is, and you kind of like try to explain it with prompting as much as you can, so it would understand, this is a light, the sun. Okay, so it's we shine a sun here. But however, I think a similar approach you can make by writing down each of the lighting settings that you usually have in your render engines as prompts, which is also an experiment that I wanted to see. So maybe you can write something like global illumination, direct illumination, I don't know, ambient occlusion. You can actually write these concepts and use them as prompts and see what the weighting is going to do. Maybe the model already somehow understands these concepts, because once again, it's been trained on like a lot of words. It's a gigantic bag of words and a lot of pictures. So maybe it does somewhere in the training set, maybe it understands actually this. So you can kind of see the effect of these kind of things displayed as an output. So you can kind of like literally write them down as prompts, and you set the weights up and down, and you see if it affects the image. Just food for thought. That's but does IC include it as a setting? I don't think it does. No, I don't think.
I think this was again a good point about like building workflows. I think just determining like the concepts that you need for your project, for your task, for your work, that's where you should start, and then just kind of figure out how do I translate this concept into AI notes or prompts or whatever other tool I'm using, basically.
Exactly.
Amazing, man! This was fantastic. This was wonderful, man.
You're very generous, guys. Really, it's
likewise. You are generous. You shared all of your concepts with us and explained them like very well, like methodically, like step by step. I saw like a lot of people like said like all this, like it is clear and like they follow everything, you know. And these are difficult concepts you're explaining, you know. So amazing.
Thank you so much. I use also state-of-the-art technology, which is Paint to Paintbrush. It's uncontested.
Yeah. Let's wrap it up. I think it's been like an hour and 15.
Yeah, I think this is the most that you've done with the stream so far, right?
But it's amazing, man. A lot of good concepts, a great conversation in general, just about like AI.
Thank you guys.
But
And
yeah,
thank you
anything
for having the
to-
platform, for being such also great hosts. It's very nice. I think it's a very refreshing platform or format to have on LinkedIn, and it's very nice that you came up with something like this specifically for like generative AI and for this kind of like community that's growing up to have. It's a very refreshing format. It's a wonderful idea.
Oh, thank you.
People want to learn. People want to know what's going on, and it's. I think that's great, just that people are out there who are spreading knowledge, and it's a great hub.
It is. I completely agree.
Yeah. Anything else you would like to add, Maggot? Anything to wrap up?
If there are any questions, if anybody has anything to say, I'm also available if you'd like to send me privately to me, or of course also to Luka and Nejc. Like, feel free to share whatever you want, your thoughts. If there is something that you feel that I've maybe misunderstood or misexplained in this whole presentation, please let me know. And once again, your input is always appreciated.
And of course, we will put down all the relevant links so you can access the workflow. You can access all the things we mentioned in this show.
Yeah. Oh my God, man. So generous. I love it. I love this vibe, man. We're just hanging out, we're just sharing. Thank you all for joining as well and like the conversation.
Thank you, guys. Thank
Amir
you.
had so
Thank you,
many great
Maggot.
contributions.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.